So let me tell you, speaker, one of the things, and I mentioned it to you for briefly. One of the reasons I started this podcast is based upon our interaction when we first really started getting to know
Really?
each other. We were working on a
Do I
piece of,
get any royalties? If
no, that's a good question. The lawyer in you was always thinking about it. We were working on a piece of legislation. It was the Fair Chance in the Housing Act. Senator Singleton was a sponsor. Assemblyman Wembley was the sponsor on the Assembly side. And there was some tension about how we were going to get this done.
Mhm.
And I remember you called me one day and you said, listen, Reverend Dobson, I give you my word. Do you remember that?
around it, I don't remember the specific conversation.
Yeah. You said, I'm going to call you 8:30 tomorrow morning. I give you my word. You called me 8:30 the next morning and we got that bill signed and passed. Historic piece of legislation called the Fair Chance in Housing Act,
Mhm.
which limit the use of criminal background checks.
Right.
The strongest law in the country for returning citizens coming home to have access to housing. You said that to me. And then after we got the bill passed, you said, you know what? We should get a drink one day. And what has followed for the past few years?
We, from time to time, on a pretty regular basis,
Yeah.
we'll get together and have a drink and solve some of the world's problems and in the course of that build a friendship and talk about things that are important. So
Yeah.
it's a really terrific relationship. I'm glad we had the first phone call and I'm glad we had the drinks afterwards.
Yeah. Yeah. That's how this relationship got started. And it was really, we sit down, me and you, we talk about life. We talk about politics. We talk about our grandkids. Got to know your son, Craig, who's an attorney.
Well, he's not. He's a government affairs guy.
Government
for
affairs.
Kane.
Yeah, for Kane.
My other two kids are lawyers.
Yeah. And so this relationship started, out of a bill that we're trying to get done. There was some tension and we got to an understanding and developed a relationship. So I think one of the things that we're trying to do and have discussions really have people understand that elected officials are people that have families, that have kids, that have grandkids, and do great work, which you do. So one of the things you could just learn. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, that's kind that you should say I do great work.
Yeah, you do. And we'll talk about that in a minute. But one of the things we wanted to really just talk a little bit about your upbringing, like where you from,
Sure.
What was your household like? Did you talk about politics or stuff in the home or?
So, well, thank you for that. And that's true. And I think, look, I think things start, first of all, if you say you're going to call somebody at 8:30 in the morning, you call somebody at 8:30 in the morning, even if you don't know what the subject or the tenor of the conversation is going to be. Do the hard things, do the easy things and get stuff done. Similar story, you probably heard me tell it last night with Reverend Boyer. We were talking about prisoner release and we weren't necessarily in the same place. And over the course of time, we've done that. We worked on the excise tax and the cannabis bill and built a friendship there. I grew up in a little town called South Amboy, New Jersey. It was about 8,000 people. Still is a little bigger than that now. My dad worked at Chevron Oil and my mom had worked with for what was first Barber Asphalt and then became Chevron itself. My dad got hurt when my mom and dad were married for about 13 years. I didn't think they were going to be able to have kids. And son of a gun, they had me. Year and a half later, they had my sister. And a month after that, my dad gets hurt in an industrial accident at work. They were lifting lengths of pipe out of a rail car and one slipped and hit him. He got back and went back to work. And then he got ill, had a disease. And he died when I was like 4.5.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
So
I didn't know that.
So I was raised by my mom and my sister.
Single mom.
Single mom. Yeah. And this is 1962, 63, something like that. And that's the family I grew up in. My mom was an amazing woman. Never once was angry that, life had not been particularly kind to her. Always made us know that life had been kind of really kind to us because we had a wonderful life. She never said, woe is me. Was never, and for my sister and me, being raised in a family by a single mother was just the way it was. I mean, we were kids when we started. It's funny. I try to discern what are independent recollections about my dad and what are just stories I've heard so many times over the course of life that they've just sort of ingrained in this confusion. Very few real, things I remember, if any, about my dad. So when people they tell you they remember stuff when they were 4, I'd probably say, nah, you don't, because I've tried like heck to do that. I haven't. But so we had a regular, normal life. My mom was there. She, as we grew up, she went back to work more and more. First, when we were little, she was not working, and then she was work part time, and then she did that. And I think I came, honestly, in retrospect, I now understand why some of the programs that are social programs that are in place are really so important, right? My mom was able to get Social Security through my dad. It was my sister and I actually were eligible for Social Security benefits. That's how I got my first phone in college. Because back in the old days, I mean, when I was in college, there were no cell phones. You had to go to the phone store and get a phone. And I had a source of income because I had Social Security benefits, even though I didn't have, or only had a part-time job back then. Come home on the weekends and work. But it was a wonderful, terrific life. My grandfather would come over pretty much every weekend, so I got to be very close to him. That's why I'm a Yankee fan, because he was a Yankee fan.
Unfortunately, you're a Yankee fan.
It's a good thing. Go win 20 more World Series and come back and talk to me. And it was just it was a terrific place. My mom was a little bit involved in politics. Back in those days, not everybody had a car. And so it was not uncommon for people to drive people to the polls. So my mom volunteered to the Democratic Party, and she would drive, people would call, and she would on a poll day. And so politics was always something that was a little bit there, and certainly enough that she had her 10-year-old son watching here's my biggest memory, and what has defined my political views ever since. It was 1968. Nixon Humphrey. Seemed like it was very late at night, and I've always been a late night person. My house is now it is. We take the kids to the movies at 12 o'clock when they were little, and they'd say it's not playing now, and they said, "Well, the paper says 12 o'clock. What do you mean noon?" Because we'd be there at midnight. So we're watching the returns, and it was a very close race. And I asked my mom who we wanted to win, and she said, "We want the Democrats to win." And I said, "Why?" And she said, "Because they care about people like us."
Wow.
And that is as profound to her 66-year-old son as it was understandable to her 10-year-old son. And so that was the basis of my political views ever since. It's been the guiding principle. And so life was really good. I went off and went to college, and went on to law school. And
what made you decide to go to law school? Like,
I wanted to save the world.
Really?
Yeah, I wanted to be a sportscaster when I first got there. So then I guess I either chickened out or thought my voice wasn't deep enough. Like it was Marv Albert and stuff like that. Maybe I had voices that I thought were better than mine. Maybe I just didn't want to try. And decided I was going to try to save the world. And so the first thing I applied for was a fellowship to go to Appalachia and do public service.
Really?
Yeah. Well, I failed at getting that job. So then you get around to the point where you got to now kind of make a living. And so I went, came back and actually worked for an insurance company first. First job I got was captive insurance company in Manhattan. But life was different in the 60s than it was now. The delis were only open till noon, and then it would close. Bars weren't open on Sundays. We would we'd go to mass, and then we'd come home.
I wanted to ask you about that. So you were raised.
I was Catholic. I'm a Catholic. I still am. Still go to mass every week, and find great peace and comfort in that. And so I went to public school, and I think that's probably why I'm such a staunch public school advocate. But went to what we called CCD. It was a religious class
Catholic
kids.
Class.
Now South Amboy is 8,000 people. It was overwhelmingly Catholic.
Hmm.
I mean, I say overwhelmingly. I mean, like overwhelmingly Catholic, overwhelmingly white.
Hmm.
And so that we would walk. They would let us out of school early to go to CCD. That the interesting part was, despite it being so overwhelmingly Catholic, there were two churches. There was the Catholic. I mean, they're both Catholic churches. They're two big churches. One was Sacred Heart, which was the Polish church,
Hmm.
where Polish people generally went. And it still, till today, I think they still have mass in Polish. And then St. Mary's, which was the Irish,
Irish.
because there's a lot of Irish and a lot of Polish in South Hamlin.
Wow.
But there was also a synagogue, and there was a
Mhm.
Presbyterian church, and a Lutheran church, and a Episcopal church, and
Mhm.
probably two or three other churches I can't remember.
Did race play a role in your upbringing? No.
No, I mean, um, there weren't, as I said, I don't know. I don't think there were any black people. And I don't even know if there were any people of color
When
at
you were
all.
growing up?
Growing up in many of my classes, and it was small.
Mhm.
My high school graduating class, 72 people.
Hmm. It's interesting because we were talking about, I don't know if many Americans know today that really in the religious community, it was divided by the ethnic makeup. Like you had the Irish Catholic Church, you had the Polish Catholic Church, and that's how it
I mean,
was.
this was an 8,000 person town. We had two, and they were the two big churches.
They were all, and you look through throughout America in these neighborhoods,
100%.
religions was divided by ethnic makeup.
Yeah.
Race came later, and that's a whole nother discussion. But it was part of one of the reasons why we talk about this issue of race, because race was really just a social construct, right? For the most part, we are all ethnic people. Well, not for the most part. I mean, we're literally all ethnic people, and that changed over time, particularly to really race has been used to exploit. And it's some of the things that you've championed, Speaker. You've championed some real significant pieces of legislation around housing. What played a role in your life that housing is so important to you?
I think the same thing that play. I also am proud of the work that we've done around the fight against food insecurity,
Mhm.
right? And it's the same thing. And I've been asked many times. I've been asked several times if I struggled with food insecurity at any point in my life, and the answer is no,
Mhm.
absolutely not. Never once, not ever. It would be wholly unfair to my mom to let anybody think that we didn't have anything but the best of lives. And so it's just as a sense,
Mhm.
and it makes me angry that people don't have a place to live, because I love my home,
Mhm.
right? My home, my family is close. You've met some of my boys.
Yeah.
We're a very, very close family.
Met your wife?
The
met your
term we
boys?
use is that we live life together.
Mhm.
My boys are all out of the house now. I have three sons, 35, 32, 29. They're not kids, they're my kids, but one lives 6 miles away one direction, one lives 2 miles away, and then one lives 6 miles away. So we have a 6-mile limit. We didn't, because I'm not letting them go beyond that. But we routinely interact. My wife watches my grandkids 2 days a week. My sons are in and out of my house. I talk to them literally every day.
Mhm.
And so the house is the focal point of that, right? We live in a modest development neighborhood in Fords, which is part of Woodbridge Township now, 5.2 miles away from the house I grew up in, but who's counting? And so I think the notion that we have, the Coughlins are very, very lucky. We're very blessed.
Mhm.
We never worry about whether we're going to eat,
Mhm.
only what, a lot of times where.
Mhm.
And we have a wonderful home, right? We're warm and we're dry and we're happy, and that other people don't have that just really annoys it. It's like, seems not fair. Like, why not? Why shouldn't we do that? Why shouldn't we be committed? Aren't we our brother's keepers? Yes.
Mhm.
The answer
Does
is
that come
yes.
from that? Does it come from your upbringing with your mom being a single parent? Does it come from your faith? Where is that core? And I see it in your face when you're talking about it. It really bothers you.
It does bother me.
So where does that come from? Is that?
I don't know. I guess all of those things. I mean, my mother made a wonderful home for us. So that the notion of being home, being in a place together has always been special. Some of it is certainly your upbringing and your faith. I mean, I think what is universal about every real faith is that at the essence is help other people, right? Be a good person, help other people, care about something bigger, more important than yourself. I think that so that although I don't know, I never kind of dissected the formula. It's just the way that it is.
Hmm. Did that lead you into public life? I mean, you got
No, I
into.
wanted to be president when I was in high school. I watched that election return and said, "Damn, I can do that."
Yeah,
Uh,
was it a significant moment in your life that really got you into? What led you into public office?
well, I mean, from honestly, from watching it and being involved in it, it's very exciting.
Hmm.
It is incredibly exciting to be involved in politics. Like on a visceral level, it's exciting, right? There is competition.
Yep.
So there is that. I'm a big sports fan too, um, and so that the element of that is attractive. The notion about being able to make a difference. I think that's why everybody gets involved. Most everybody. I and I say this without regard to party. I don't think I've ever met anybody who didn't start off wanting to make a difference.
Yeah.
Maybe make a change, maybe preserve what was. I mean, there were different motivations there, but everybody I've ever met did it for good reason.
Mhm.
No, nobody did it to aggrandize themselves. Now, people do that as we go through the process, and I hope I don't. Try not to. But the but I think people genuinely want to make a difference, and I think that was probably what motivated me, and the excitement of doing that race.
And
Running a race.
one of the difficult things, I don't know how many New Jerseyans know this, but you guys have full-time jobs. It's like there's only
I'm a full-time.
few states, I mean, throughout the country that elected officials still all of you all work full-time jobs. How do you balance that?
You just work a lot. We're talking about our conversation. That conversation that you talked about at 8:30 in the morning might have been on a Sunday, or it might have been on a holiday.
Yeah.
I mean, it doesn't. There really aren't that. Not good, and I suspect most of the folks around me are not good with the work-play boundary kind of thing. That's not really. When I hire somebody, I say to them, "Look, I'm going to feel really guilty when I call you on Saturday night and tell you I need something, but I'm going to call you. I'll feel bad about it. I'll apologize and mean it sincerely, and then expect you to answer the phone and do it." So, which is doesn't make me a great boss, but it's because you're committed to it, right? And it's what you do, and it's and you have to get things done, right? And so getting stuff done. And we have, yes, I mean, I do. I have work. I have wonderful law partners. I'm a lawyer and have a law firm, and they're really good about me doing the speaker's job, because the speaker's job is really a full-time job.
Yeah, you've done it very well for years now. And what would you say is some of your proudest moments as being a speaker? Because you have a lot.
Yeah, well, we've been pretty successful. Well, I mean, look, on this, I guess on the self-ego thing, being the longest speaker in history is nice. I think that makes you feel good about yourself, and I think will be special for my little grandkids when they go take their tour of the State House in fourth grade with their civics class, which everybody should do, by the way.
I had my granddaughter. You have the picture with my granddaughter.
100%. So everybody should bring their kids there, and with classes should all come and see it. It's an incredibly special place. I think the work that we have done there, that I probably get too much credit for, but in making food insecurity a priority. Well, government is really good at solving things. I think we do. But we need to put our shoulder to the wheel. And there's competing priorities across the spectrum of things, and all of them are important. But you can't really be an expert at everything, right? I mean, on any given day, we can be talking about the environmental impact of some fertilizer and their impact on farming, and what tax credits we ought to use to incentivize people to this, what rules we ought to make for education, all kinds of conceptual things that you can't be an expert on all of them. If you think you are, you're fooling yourself. So by making something a priority, and that's what I've done, I think that probably is my greatest, making food insecurity a priority. Because now once we have done lots of good things in that regard. There's $85 million in a budget for emergency food, and we have the only food insecurity advocate in the nation. We're the first and only state to, when the cliff came, there was a cliff on SNAP benefits.
Mm-hmm.
We were already going to go above what the national amount was going to be, which is ridiculously low, and went to maintain it at $95 per family, which is I challenge most people to try to raise their family on $95 worth of food stamps, or SNAP benefits. So doing that, having gone I got invited to President Biden had a food insecurity conference, first one since President Johnson, like 2.5 years ago. And when you're a little kid growing up in South Amboy, you always, if you can weave in that you were invited to the White House, you do it. So I'm going to do it right now. So I was invited to the White House as part of that, and got to hear. Senator Booker was hugely instrumental in helping me get there. And I got to hear what other states were talking about. And what they talk about in aspirational terms is things we talk about in the rearview mirror.
Yeah.
We're looking for the next generation, the next challenge. So we're going to do that. I think that would be, I was really proud of the fact that we passed the minimum wage bill, which I think was much more difficult than I thought it was going to be. I thought everyone felt like, yeah, no, not everybody said, yeah, right away. We got that done. Happened to pass it on my birthday, which was really pretty cool.
Wow.
So I think those things are the kind of things that we've done, to your point, I think we've done a lot of things that we can. I think our environmental justice bill is probably as good as it is in the nation. Our housing bill that just passed, that you were instrumental in putting together and getting done, which probably will result in 50,000 units over the course of the next decade. As preposterous as it was, the first bill I did was a pay equity bill to say women ought to get paid the same as men. That was A1 when my very first time. So things like that.
Yeah, it's just amazing. You mentioned LBJ, who I think is the greatest president this country.
We've had that conversation.
We've had
over a cocktail.
Yes, I think he's the greatest president we ever seen.
It's funny. I don't know as much about. I read a little bit of a book that it talked about leadership, and it was the two Roosevelts, Johnson and Lincoln. Doris Kearns Goodwin, and we've talked about that. And he was really truly remarkable. Right, and probably the greatest social justice president, bar none.
Bar none, and that's my point, particularly in the time we talk about this political tension, like in today's time, and there's a lot of political tension. But during his era, it was even more because of all the civil rights legislation. Right. So, what do you think about today's political climate? Like, how do you manage? How do you deal with the tension that exists around today's political climate?
So, I think there's two places. I think we need to look at Washington and Trenton in two different ways, as two different places. What I don't live in Trenton. I mean, I don't live in the Washington world, but what I see, the rancor and the discord is really not becoming. It's not what we dreamed of when we had this great experiment called democracy. Trenton is closer to that. I was a couple voting sessions ago, I was up on the podium before getting started, and everybody in the crowd kind of gathers in groups around the thing, and you couldn't tell who the Democrats were and who the Republicans were unless you knew them, because Democrats were talking to Republicans were talking to Democrats. That most of the bills we pass is with overwhelming bipartisan support. John DeMeo has been a terrific partner, the minority leader. When we did things about, this is a couple of years ago, we did bills relative to vote by mail. And if you recall, back then there was some challenges
I remember.
and real criticism, probably even longer than 2 years ago, 4 years ago, when the Trump candidacy was talking about how they were fixing rigging events. And it's not true, and we all know that, and we all know it probably clearer now. But John and I put together a bill because we jointly thought it was really important for people in New Jersey that, hey, we have free, fair elections, and we want to make sure that you guys are confident. We did it together. I think if you get to know people,
Mm-hmm.
and I know we've had this conversation before, if you get to know people, you don't distrust their motives.
Wow.
You,
Wow.
you may disagree with them,
Mm-hmm.
and you can passionately disagree with them.
Mm-hmm.
That we ought to sometimes be passionate about that disagreement, but you don't think they're a bad person. And I'm not sure that that's happening in Washington.
Yeah.
I'm not sure there aren't some bad people in Washington. But I don't. That's why I call you and say, "Look, I'm not sure we're going to be." That's why you take the call
Mm-hmm.
and say, "This guy, I don't trust this guy." You don't say that. You say, "Okay, let's see what we got. Let's see who this person is," and then you end up with a friend. And even when we don't disagree, like we were talking about the housing bill, we agree on everything, right? But we come to a place, and if you start off with a fundamental notion that you want to be in the same place. Now, look, if you had two people who said, "I'm never going to do this, I'm always going to do that," you still ought to talk to each other about it. And sometimes it helps to have people who define the parameters, right? Both the ends. But if you talk to people about things, you tend to be less rancorous, right? Yeah. It doesn't become personal. Yeah. It becomes political, or because let's face it, there are political elements to all that stuff too. Anybody tells you that the politics of something isn't part of the decision making process is lying. Yeah, it is part of. Or they're just different. They're different. So, but I think that's so. I don't see necessarily in Trenton the kind of discord and distrust and rancor. Yeah, that's interesting. You said that was a very profound statement you made a few minutes ago. It was pretty powerful. If you had a young person came to you, Speaker Coughlin, I'm thinking about going into public office, what advice would you give them? Get involved, show up. So that's that simple. I do hear that because I get to, I like to talk to high school classes or college classes. And if you want to do that, it's that simple and that challenging. So, most things aren't just easy or hard, right? They're kind of a little of both. So show up. Yeah. Show up at a campaign and do it. Now, you're not going to know anyone. You're going to have to have that awkward way of working through and getting to know people and getting engaged and making friends and all that stuff, which can be a challenge. Probably don't expect to be in charge of the campaign when you get there. But just be a good, reliable source of help, right? Either, and then look for opportunities to demonstrate where you're really talented. Like, so some of the stuff, like I'm 66, if you haven't figured it out by doing the math, when I was 10 years old, watching a thing in 1968. So there were things that technologically are challenging, right? And frightening a little bit. I mean, I think that's one of the reasons. But an 18-year-old who shows up might be a whiz at that. Yeah. So look for an opportunity to do that, and then you just become part of the team. So I think that's how I would tell them to get involved, and then figure out what they like to do. Some people want to run for office. Some people like being out front. Some people don't. Some people want to be involved in the research. Some people want to lead other people to, run the vote, get out the mail, or get out the vote campaign. So figure out what you like to do. And then I think that's true in life. By the way. Figure out what you like to do and then try to go do it. And I wouldn't worry so much about the money that will come, because you're going to be the best at what you love to do, right? I mean, the people, that's an old cliche, right? If you have a job you like, you never work a day in your life. And it is true. So do that, get involved. And I also beg kids to get involved in public service, not just as an elected person, not just in the political world, but in the service to your community kind of place. Work for the municipality, work for a county, work for the state government. You get to make a lot of difference in people's lives. Now, you're not going to be a hedge fund kind of guy who can retire at 35 and have your own airplane. Not going to be an influencer who has 4 million or followers, 40 million followers and make a lot of money doing, going around the world. but you're gonna make a
Yeah,
difference,
make a difference. Yeah.
and you're gonna build the community that you love,
Mm-hmm.
and you're gonna be happy with your life,
Yeah.
and you can be involved in other things, so
That's obviously a reflection upon your life because you stayed within several miles of where you grew up.
5.2.
Five.
Yeah.
That's pretty profound, pretty incredible. We got to wrap up. We always
Too bad.
ask our guests here on Navigating Realities, where dialogue meets understanding. What is your favorite quote and why?
My favorite quote. I get you. So I guess the one that sticks in my head, and that would be interesting to think about all of them. I grew up in the early 60s. John Kennedy was president.
Mm-hmm.
And so there's really two, I guess. One, so every Irish Catholic family had a picture of John Kennedy in their house, right?
In most black households,
Yeah,
it was a picture of Jesus and JFK and MLK.
We had a crucifix. We had a picture of Kennedy, and I don't know, picture of the kids, I guess. So, and that's probably true. All my kids are sports fans. They're Democrats and they're Catholic. They leave the house Catholic. Two quotes from him, I guess. One was the speech at the Berlin Wall or his inauguration, where he says, "That's not what you can do for your country. What your country can do for you. That's what you can do for your country." And the other one is because I do like challenges, and so the one that I used it when I got to be the speaker for the very first time, and I made my first speech. Is the one about we go to the moon not because it's easy, but because it's hard.
Yeah. Yeah.
Let's do the hard things.
Yeah. It's funny you picked that one because again, this was during a time where the country was very divided.
Right.
A lot was going on.
Yeah.
And our nation decided we're going to beat the Russians to the moon.
Right. Right. And that's right. That's what we said. So we're going to win.
And as hard as that was, for all this stuff, all the crap, the shit that was going on in our country during that time, and there was a lot, just as much as probably more so what's going on right now.
Yeah.
We decided to do something as a nation.
Right.
And we got it done. And so I'm glad you brought up that quote because I think that's something.
I think that's what leads to making things a priority. When I talk about making food insecurity a priority, that means we're going to resolve this because we're going to do it. We are going to beat the food insecurity crisis. There will be a day when we don't. That's what I want. I want nobody to be hungry someday, and we're going to do it because we're committed to it. Because we've made the commitment, and I've had great partners in both Senate President Scutari and Senate President Sweeney, and then Governor Murphy. They're committed to doing it. When I don't get to spend this money on my own, I have to get everybody to agree. But we're going to do it because we don't have a food shortage. What we have is a challenge of getting food to hungry people. Challenge.
Yeah.
And so that's why the food insecurity advocate is so powerful, because you can coordinate everybody, not silos. There's a will to get this done. It's not hard to get people to bring food to help somebody who's hungry, right? Municipalities throughout the state, and we have a lot of great municipalities. Municipalities are very, generally speaking, really well run. Woodbridge, for example, if you come to vote, we ask you to bring a can of food and collect it. And that happens in thousands of other ways, in thousands of other places. People want to do it. So people want to do it. We give them the leadership and the tools to do it. And we work with farmers who've been phenomenal partners in this stuff. We've made deals now with farmers and food banks. There's 6 large food banks. Wait, I know you're trying to get off the air, but too bad.
No, you're passionate about this. I mean, it comes out, right?
So that does a couple things. First of all, it provides fresh produce, because there's next steps in this thing, right? First, we catch somebody. We'll walk you through that line in a second. But it also provides a market for farmers. Being a farmer is a really hard job.
Yeah, it is.
Really, really hard. You're not in control of the weather. You're not in control of whatever pest might show up. You're not in control of the price you get to pay, right? It is set by a market that you don't have any control over. You can't decide. And, it's labor intense. It's all kinds of things. And so you don't just need rain. You need the right rain. at the right time.
Mm-hmm.
You get too much rain at one time, you flood everything. You don't get enough, you have a drought. You have the kind of gentle rain that's good, but you don't need too much of that either.
Mm-hmm.
So anyway, so that's really hard. But so we give them a market too, and that really helps.
Yeah. Well, listen, Speaker, it's been absolutely a pleasure, and let's solve poverty together,
Okay,
man. That's something that I want to get rid of. Poverty.
Okay.
This has been an enlightening experience. You said some very profound things, and
Thank you.
I wanted
Awfully
people to
kind.
hear your story, like your life story, and see why you're passionate about some of the things. My story is my story, and I'm passionate about these things too. Because and I think it helps shapes us. And kind of get an understanding of your political philosophy a little bit, your religious background, your family man, and it's pretty cool for folks to get to see you and understand your background a little bit.
I'm flattered to say I have a political philosophy. I just have a guiding principle. I'm basically a really regular guy. I grew up in a regular life in a regular town, which is pretty cool.
It is.
It's good. I wouldn't trade it.
So, Speaker, it's been a pleasure, and thank you all for joining us for Navigating Realities. And something that I love Miguel, and he has a song called "Candles in the Sun," and at the end of the song, he said, May we all live long. May we all be brave. May the bridges we burn only light our way. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
Appreciate it, man.
It was good. It was easy.
Thank you for listening. I'm Reverend Eric Dobson, and this was Navigating Realities, where dialogue meets understanding. Follow and subscribe to us on our YouTube channel, and tune in on all streaming platforms. See you next time.